With the release of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, the success of this new stage of the manga cannot be understated. This is not only my opinion, but the opinion of V-Jump itself, which has shouted out Boruto for its recent success. However, how long will the series go for? Seeing that Boruto is doing so good, talking about it potentially ending has always been something that has made me a little bit sad. I can't imagine a world where every month I don't end up reading Boruto, but this could actually end up being the case, and obviously Boruto one day will end up ending. Boruto to me is my favorite series to keep up with monthly, and I've been enjoying every chapter that it releases. But with previous statements from Kishimoto saying that the Boruto series will end in about 30 volumes, the ending of Boruto has been something that has always been in the back of my mind. However, with recent statements from Kishimoto, it is safe to say that that probably won't be the case. As from what Kishimoto ends up saying, we should expect the Boruto series to be a lot longer than was previously stated or previously expected. But let's just read exactly what Kishimoto says so that people don't confuse his statement. First of all, a lot of people will be wondering what is the source and where exactly do we get this information from Kishimoto, and this information comes from the interviews that Kishimoto and Kishimoto have conducted during their time period in France. There were a bunch of interviews, I believe 2 to 3 interviews were conducted, and slowly and maturely some of the translations for the interviews are starting to come out, and this is exactly what we end up getting here. We have a Kishimoto who is essentially talking about the process of the Boruto series and everything that is going on in Boruto. This is what Kishimoto comments. For Boruto, I initially just provided some basic concepts and hints. After that, I came up with about 30% of the story's idea. The rest, including the storyboards, are all being handled by Kishimoto. At this point, I just check over the finished drafts to make sure there are no issues. When discussing the length of the Boruto series, he said that at first, I thought Boruto might be a shorter series, but Kishimoto keeps putting out new ideas, adding more characters, and expanding the story. When I look at it now, I feel reassured and think it will be okay, though I get the impression that it might go on for a while longer. This is what we end up getting from Kishimoto, who is basically saying that Kishimoto is consistently cooking up new ideas, adding up multiple characters, and making the story even more interesting with the add-ons that he has decided. Right now, a lot of people don't really understand the writing process that is going on, but essentially it can be broken down like this. Kishimoto had basically written the entire story of Boruto. He had left it open-ended so that if Kishimoto or Kadashi, who was previously writing the story, wanted to add extra stuff, they could do so. However, based on the statements that are given, the main ideas of Boruto have already been decided and written upon. However, how exactly we're going to get to those moments are things that are not already decided. And with Kishimoto, who has now taken on the writing process of the series, he is the one that is in control how we're going to get to the big finales that Kishimoto has planned. And this is what we're currently seeing right now, as there has been multiple statements from Kishimoto and Kishimoto where Kishimoto maybe wanted a character to be killed, but then Kishimoto said no, that he wants to continue writing up this character. I truly believe that that character was supposed to be Code, and with the fact that we have the Senjus that are now created, I do believe that this is why this is the path that Kishimoto wanted to take, which means that maybe the likes of the Senju wasn't something that was already discussed previously, but after Kishimoto started up cooking, he decided to expand on the idea of the Ten-Tails and have it evolve. This is where we're starting to see the story expand from the likes of Kishimoto to Kishimoto. Kishimoto is consistently adding new ideas. And this is where we go back to the idea that the Boruto series will end in 30 volumes. This was an idea that was constantly told to us. We had an Kishimoto who, right when the story began, he said that he wanted the Boruto story to end in 30 volumes. So let's go back to the context behind this statement. First of all, the main gist and the main idea for this is because he wanted the entire Boruto/Naruto series in a collective to end in about 100 volumes. We had the Naruto series that ended in 72 volumes, and he wanted the Boruto series to end in about 30 so that it wouldn't go too far beyond 100 volumes. And this was the idea at first, but behind that statement, Kishimoto at the time wasn't the one who was in charge of the writing. It was Kodashi, and Kodashi's writing, and you can clearly see how fast-paced the story was when it came to Kodashi's writing. This is clearly evident in the Kawaki arc, in the Ishiki arc. We would see how everything was moving fast-paced. But when Kishimoto came back at around Baryon Mode, when the chapter of Baryon Mode came out and they ended up defeating Ishiki, from that moment on in the Code arc, we started to see the series slow down in pacing. And it was quite obvious in the Code arc, and we later come to see the Omnipotence arc and everything that was behind that, and we truly come to find out that at the point that Kishimoto actually came back, Kishimoto came back as a supervisor. Just like he says, at the end he ends up checking up on the manuscript that Kishimoto ends up writing. But the one who is behind everything is actually Kishimoto. So it is safe to say that the person who is writing Boruto as of right now is Kishimoto, with Kishimoto who checks up before the chapter ends up being released to make sure that everything is okay and everything is coherent. So the genius behind the Omnipotence arc, which a lot of people do end up giving to Kishimoto, and safe to say that he probably did play a role, but the one truly behind it was Kishimoto. So in Kishimoto we truly trust, and we're currently starting to see that basically this is Kishimoto's work. And the main argument behind why Boruto really had to end quick is because at first this was not truly Kishimoto's work. It was the collaboration of Kishimoto, Kodashi, Kishimoto, who at the time was strictly drawing, and Kodashi was the one who was behind the writing, but ever since he left, we have a Kishimoto who is now the one writing and drawing, with a Kishimoto who is supervising everything. And due to that in the beginning, a lot of people wondered when would Kishimoto get a chance to make his own manga, to make his own work. But with him now being the one behind the writing, it is basically Kishimoto's work. He is the one behind everything that is going on, the dialogue, the story's expansion, the senju in my opinion, and thus we are seeing that this is Kishimoto's work, so we can't expect Kishimoto to end up working on this like this is his own manga, and he will basically be the one to decide when the story ends up ending. Because at first, if we end up looking back at the timeline that a lot of people propose when Boruto is supposedly ending in 30 volumes, we have Boruto Part 1 that ended in 20 volumes, which now means that for Boruto TBV, there was 10 volumes left. Okay, that's cool, but Boruto 2 Blue Vortex at the current moment has already 3 volumes that came out, and a 4th one that is about to be released. So, are you going to tell me that the rest of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex will end in 6 volumes? I truly doubt that that will be the case. I don't even think it's going to end in 10, in my personal opinion. We have so many different things that have to end up happening. The expansion of the Otsukis. Now we have the Senju, and when the Senju were announced and we had this new villain group is when I truly knew that the series was going to be a lot longer than a lot of people ended up expecting. And this is what these recent interviews have been showcasing to me and to a lot of people who end up reading these interviews. At first, if the series was supposed to end in about 30 volumes, I truly believe that we would have continued diving into Code and Kawaki's relationship with a Boruto who eventually ended up dealing with the likes of Code, Kawaki, Omnipotence, and then the story would conclude. But with the addition of the Senju, okay, you could say maybe the Senju are going to be defeated quite quickly, but now we go to the land of wind, and we see that the Senju's goal is something that is constantly being manipulated. Kishimoto is cooking up something crazy with the Senju. Their writing is extraordinary, in my personal opinion. So what we're seeing right now is Kishimoto taking the time to flesh out these characters, not paying too much attention to that so-called 30 volume deadline that everything is going against. And the reason I didn't make this video before is because this this is just my own idea. But now to have the likes of Kishimoto himself, the one who is basically behind the magic of Naruto and Boruto, say it himself, it basically confirms everything that I am saying in the fact that this series is actually going to be going on for a lot longer than most people thought. And personally, I am quite happy to see this. I am quite happy to see the series take on for a longer period of time. And personally, if you reach a point when the series is supposed to end, I would rather them end it instead of them trying to drag it on. I really love the fact that Naruto wasn't really dragged on too much longer, because it usually tends to end up ruining the conclusion of an arc. But also, one thing could be said, that if the Boruto series did end in these next 6 volumes, that the Boruto ending would be rushed and the conclusion of the series wouldn't be good. So we don't want either to happen. So whenever Kishimoto does expand and flesh out all these ideas, the story can truly come to an end. But it's quite good to know that the story will not be ending until everything is fleshed out and Kishimoto feels certain that yes, this is a work that I am proud of and the conclusion could go on just like I have expected. So this is good news in my personal opinion. But talking about the ending, a lot of people have been asking me questions regarding how I believe that the story could end up ending. And this question was asked to me by Cosmic Boredom, and this is what he says: could you explain how it could end? And this is a very interesting topic, and I'm not going to be going off the basis of things that have been happening off this recent chapter to make my personal conclusion, but I'll give you guys what I personally think. One thing is for certain to me, and this is almost like what happened with Madara. We kept hearing the name of Madara and Madara over and over again, and then eventually we saw him. And this is what I believe is going to be quite similar with the likes of Shiba Otsutsuki. The reason why we got the name Shiba Otsutsuki and we just didn't see an Otsutsuki god means to me that Shiba Otsutsuki somehow is going to make an appearance in the series. Personally, I really don't know how it's going to happen. We'll see how Kishimoto ends up cooking it up, but just like Madara was being name dropped over and over and over again, I do believe that Shiba Otsutsuki is going to make an appearance. Shiba Otsutsuki was name dropped by Amado, Momoshiki, and thus I believe that he truly will have an influence in the series. He already does. All the broken characters in the series right now, Ada, Damien, the likes of Kashin Koji, and Delta in the future, they all have some influence from Shiba Otsutsuki. So thus, I truly do believe that we will end up seeing Shiba Otsutsuki. Shiba almost takes up the role of both Hashirama and Madara. We see Madara having the crazy clout, then the myths behind his name and everything that he did, and Shiba Otsutsuki definitely has that. But just like Hashirama, Shiba also has the fact that people have his cells and are using his body in order to become a lot stronger. But with the topic of Shiba Otsutsuki, I do believe that at least somebody is going to become an Otsutsuki god. And in my opinion, I do believe that it's going to be Boruto. A lot of people might say that this is a little bit crazy because of the fact that you kind of have to eat a chakra fruit. I wouldn't say that it's a prerequisite, but it's definitely the path that those other gods definitely took when it came to becoming an Otsutsuki god. So I do understand that stance, but due to some of Kishimoto's previous writing, where we had this almost godly figure, and the MC in Samurai 8, who eventually ended up becoming this godly figure, and maxing out all his abilities and ascending, I do believe that we could end up seeing a similar path for the Boruto series. Is my opinion founded on the best argumentation? Clearly not, but it's just my own personal opinion, so I won't get mad if you guys have something different. Do let me know though, how do you think that the Boruto series could end up ending, and when? I didn't really tackle this in this video, but I personally don't think that Boruto will end in the next 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 years, but maybe that's when Boruto might potentially end, maybe 5 years, but definitely not in the next 2 to 3 years. And this brings me on to the next comment by Isam, who says that my guess is that the story will end in 3 to 5 years. The story could go on in many different ways, and there is a ton of lore, and I definitely agree with what he is saying. This is also kind of my guess that I am going with, 3 to 5 years, or maybe slightly a little bit longer, maybe an extra year added onto that. And there's literally a bunch of different ways that the story could end up up going. Right now, when we look at the series could end in a multitude of ways. The series is still in a state where there's potentially a positive ending, maybe one that is bittersweet with Boruto, or maybe one that is sad. There are so many different paths that the story could end up taking, but what I personally do believe will happen is something of the likes of Boruto sacrificing himself in some sort of way. Maybe Boruto, as he tries to become an Otsutsuki god to protect his family in some sort of way or protect the planet, he does end up sacrificing himself in some sort of way. I really don't know. This is just theories, so let me know again your personal way that the story will end. The next comment is by My Star Killer, and he says, "What is your take on Tonori Otsutsuki in Boruto to Blue Vortex future?" I do think that when Boruto ends up getting his Jogan, Tonori will have some sort of a role to play. And I know a lot of people don't believe that the Jogan is canon, and I'm really not going to argue about it. We have Kishimoto, who did make statements talking about Boruto's special eye. He didn't say the Jogan per se, but he did say special eye. We had different animators that work with Kishimoto saying that it is called the pure eye Jogan, whatever you want to interpret it as. So I do believe that Boruto does possess this special eye, and I do believe that Tonori is heavily linked when it comes to that Jogan. But how exactly it's going to happen, I truly don't know, but I do believe that Tonori has some sort of role to play. Is he sealed in the manga or not? I don't really know, but when Boruto does get his Jogan, I truly do believe that Tonori will be connected in that. And I could be wrong or right on that subject, but that's just my personal take. The next comment is by Orphe Melomu. I don't know if I said your name right, but this was the most liked comment, so I wanted to make sure I ended up covering it. But he says, "I want Boruto to be just as long as Naruto. I want the spirit world to be explored, where the Sage of Six Path is, the Grand Reaper lives. I want the other continents to be explained. In the data books, Kishimoto said that there are thousands or infinite amounts of turtle islands." And this is a very good point to be made, and I want to break down and talk about them one by one. Personally, I doubt that the Boruto series will be as long as the Naruto series in my personal opinion. When it comes to the Boruto series, I do believe that the Boruto series will be a lot longer than we expected, and I think it's going to be in the ranges of maybe 40 to 50 volumes in my personal opinion. Any much longer I think would be a stretch. I think it's probably going to end up being around the 40 mark in my personal opinion. But when it comes to your other points, I do find them quite interesting. When it comes to the other continents, this was something that was explained in the Sasuke dinosaur manga that did come out for a period of time, the fact that there are other continents that one could go to. So this is definitely a path that the series could end up taking. Explanations like the Sage of Six Path and the Grim Reaper could be something interesting. I do believe that the Grim Reaper would be a more interesting path to go down. Maybe is he a Otsutsuki, something of the sort. That could be something that is definitely interesting. But one thing that we do have to see for me is the exploration of Otsutsuki lore. That's the most interesting thing to me. The other stuff, you can keep it to Naruto, that's cool and everything, but I really am curious about everything that is Otsutsuki related. And this leads me on to the final comment that we'll be discussing by Squidward, and this is what he says. "I honestly want to know more about the Otsutsuki's home, and why exactly they came to such a parasitic philosophy. To them, it seems like their natural way of life. To us, it is violent, abhorrent, and disturbing. They take their families, convert them into data to be downloaded by other members to power up and get stronger, and using a form of USB backups, in the sense of karma, can come back to life. How did they figure out they could do that? Also, I need to know more about Shibai. It's killing me." And I definitely do agree. These are some of the stuff that if Boruto ends today and we don't know, I'd be extremely disappointed. Especially their home planet and how exactly they're able to behave in such a way. To me, it almost seems so scientific-like, or so much like an engineer. Everything about the way they use their karma, it could all be seen in such a scientific light. When I say scientific, I don't only mean chemicals and stuff like that. Engineering is a form of science, so the way they end up using their karma, everything can be interpreted in a form of technology, science, and this way of life. So I truly am quite interested. We do know that they have a clan, as Urashiki was literally saying that the clan sent him out to end up paying a visit and making sure everything was good. Momoshiki and Kinshiki ended up coming to the Boruto universe because Kaguya's world ended up exceeding the threshold when a chakra fruit has to be planted due to Naruto's power that was constantly growing and all the various threats that were in the Naruto planets. So there is definitely so much that could be talked about, and if the Boruto series ends without this happening, I would be extremely disappointed. But that's why you have to watch this video right here, as we not only have news on the Boruto manga, but we have news on the comeback of the Boruto anime. Make sure to watch this video right here to find out what.